The sound of footsteps echoed through busy downtown streets as panic breaths cut through the air. A young man darted between surprised shoppers, clutching something tightly against his chest. Behind him, angry shouts grew closer. Time seemed to freeze as the young man collided with someone, a tall figure wearing a black jacket and sunglasses. The impact sent both sprawling onto the sidewalk. The tall man's sunglasses fell away, revealing a face millions would recognize instantly. Keanu Reeves looked at the trembling teenager before him, then at the stolen wallet lying between them. The crowd gathering around them gasped, phones already recording. But what happened next stunned everyone watching. Nobody expected Keanu's reaction when he learned why this desperate young man turned to stealing. A moment that began with a crime ended up changing not just two lives, but an entire community. Before this incredible story continues, tell us where you're watching from. Tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., another amazing story awaits. Marcus Reynolds stared at the pile of medical bills scattered across his tiny kitchen table. At 19, his shoulders already carried the weight that no teenager should bear. The flickering fluorescent light cast shadows on the past due notices, each one a reminder of how desperate their situation had become. In the next room, his sister Becca's cough echoed through the paper-thin walls of their rundown apartment. The sound made his heart ache more than any bill collector's call ever could. Their one-bedroom apartment sat on the 15th floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked in months. The wallpaper peeled at the corners and the pipes groaned every time someone used the shower. But it was all they could afford since their parents' accident 2 years ago. Marcus had dropped out of college, taking whatever odd jobs he could find to keep a roof over their heads. But Becca's condition kept getting worse. Becca was 16, though she looked much younger now. The mysterious autoimmune disease that attacked her system had stolen not just her health, but her chance at a normal teenage life. Her once vibrant green eyes now looked tired, and her bright red hair had grown thin. Still, she never complained. Even on the worst days when the pain made it hard to move, she spent her days sketching in notebooks, creating worlds far more beautiful than the one they lived in. The latest round of tests had depleted their emergency fund. The specialist kept saying Becca needed more advanced treatment, but the words experimental and not covered by insurance haunted Marcus's dreams. He'd tried everything, working double shifts, selling their parents' belongings, even starting a fundraising page online. Nothing came close to the mounting cost of keeping his sister alive. That morning, watching Becca struggle to eat the last of their cereal, something inside Marcus broke. The rent was due in 3 days. The pharmacy had already refused to fill Becca's prescription without payment. His last job application had been rejected yesterday. The walls of their small apartment seemed to close in, suffocating him with the weight of his failure to provide for his only family. Becca's voice drifted from her room, humming their mother's favorite song. The sound nearly brought Marcus to his tears. He remembered his promise to their parents, to always protect his little sister. But now, standing in their kitchen with nothing left to sell and nowhere left to turn, Marcus made another promise to himself. He would do anything, absolutely anything, to save Becca's life, even if it meant crossing lines he never thought he would cross. As he pulled on his worn jacket and headed for the door, Marcus had no idea that his desperate decision would lead to an encounter that would change everything. He couldn't have known that somewhere in the city, a man in a black jacket was about to cross his path and rewrite both their stories forever. The morning sun cast long shadows between the towering buildings of downtown, turning the streets into a maze of light and shade. Marcus had spent hours watching the ebb and flow of people through the shopping district, noting their patterns like a predator studying prey. He hated thinking of it that way, but desperation had a way of changing a person's perspective. The shopping district buzzed with its usual morning energy. Well-dressed professionals rushed between coffee shops and office buildings, designer bags swinging from their arms. Tourists stopped to take photos, their wallets carelessly stuffed in back pockets. Shop workers arranged window displays, oblivious to the battle raging inside the young man watching from a nearby bench. Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped his phone, pretending to scroll through social media while actually studying potential targets. Becca had texted earlier. Her pain was getting worse. The pharmacy's deadline for payment loomed like a guillotine over his conscience. He'd already memorized the security camera locations, the quickest escape routes, the times when police patrols passed through. A group of elderly women caught his attention as they emerged from an upscale boutique. Their jewelry glinted in the morning light, but it was their handbags that drew his focus. Designer brands carelessly open, practically inviting trouble. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. These women reminded him of his grandmother, who would be horrified to see what he was considering. The crowd thickened as the morning wore on. Marcus watched the street performer draw attention with his guitar, creating the perfect distraction. The timing was right. The escape route was clear. All he needed was the courage, or perhaps the desperation, to act. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Becca. Pain getting worse. Need meds soon. That message shattered the last of his hesitation. Marcus stood, adjusting his worn jacket, trying to look casual while his heart hammered against his ribs. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, drawing closer to the group of elderly women who had stopped to watch the street performer. 20 feet away. 15. 10. He didn't notice the black SUV pulling up to the curb or the tall figure stepping out, adjusting dark sunglasses against the morning glare. Marcus was too focused on his target, on the open handbag, on thoughts of Becca waiting at home. He couldn't have known that the next few moments would completely transform his life's trajectory, or that the man in sunglasses was about to become an unexpected witness to his desperate act. Marcus timed his move perfectly, sliding between tourists as the street performer hit a crescendo on his guitar. His fingers brushed the leather of the elderly woman's handbag, finding the wallet within. Years of pickpocketing accusations from his high school bullies flashed through his mind. How ironic that he'd become exactly what they'd falsely claimed he was. The wallet slipped free, and for a moment, time seemed to slow down. Then everything went wrong. The elderly woman turned suddenly, bumping into Marcus. Her startled gasp drew attention. Marcus clutched the wallet and ran, his feet carrying him before his brain could process the decision. Shouts erupted behind him. The crowd parted like water, some people reaching for phones, others trying to block his path. Marcus darted through the growing chaos, his heart thundering in his chest. Becca's face flashed in his mind, giving his legs extra speed. He cut through an alley, vaulted over a stack of boxes, and emerged onto a less crowded street. Freedom seemed possible until he rounded the corner and slammed full force into someone stepping out of a coffee shop. The impact sent both of them sprawling onto the sidewalk. The wallet flew from Marcus's grip, skidding across the concrete. As he scrambled to his feet, he found himself staring into the face of Keanu Reeves, whose sunglasses had been knocked away in the collision. The actor's intense gaze locked onto Marcus, then shifted to the wallet lying between them. Time froze. The crowd that had been chasing Marcus caught up, forming a circle around them. Phones appeared everywhere, recording the scene. Marcus saw his chances of escape vanishing with each passing second. The elderly woman's voice cut through the murmurs as she pushed through the crowd, pointing at Marcus and calling for someone to stop him. Keanu stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. Marcus remained frozen, trapped between the approaching security guards and the man he'd seen in countless movies. His mind raced through options: run, fight, beg, confess. But before he could act, Keanu did something unexpected. He stepped between Marcus and the angry crowd. The security guards arrived, ready to grab Marcus. Someone in the crowd shouted about calling the police. The elderly woman demanded her wallet back, her voice shaking with anger and fear. Marcus felt the walls closing in, his chest tight with panic. Becca's medication, her pain, her needs, all of it would be meaningless once he was arrested. Keanu's voice cut through the chaos, deep and authoritative. He raised his hands, gesturing for everyone to calm down. The crowd fell silent, starstruck by his presence, yet confused by his actions. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes, the weight of his situation crushing down on him. He hadn't noticed he was shaking until Keanu turned to face him, those famous kind eyes studying his face with an intensity that seemed to peer straight into his soul. The elderly woman retrieved her wallet from the ground, checking its contents with trembling fingers. Everything was still there. Marcus hadn't even had time to open it. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scene, highlighting the tears now flowing freely down Marcus's cheeks. His legs gave out, and he sank to his knees, overwhelmed by shame and desperation. What happened next would stun everyone watching, transforming a moment of crime and punishment into something entirely unexpected. The crowd held their breath as Keanu Reeves knelt beside the trembling teenager. Security guards stood ready, but Keanu waved them back with a quiet authority that no one dared question. Marcus couldn't meet the actor's eyes, his shame burning hotter than the morning sun overhead. The phones kept recording, but Keanu seemed completely unconcerned with the growing social media moment unfolding around them. Keanu spoke softly, his voice carrying a gentleness that caught everyone off guard. He asked Marcus his name, then why risk everything for a stranger's wallet? The simple question broke something inside Marcus. The words poured out between quiet sobs, telling the story of Becca, of their parents' accident, of medical bills that grew faster than his minimum wage jobs could handle. He spoke of his sister's pain, of watching her fade away while he failed to help her, of the choice between letting her suffer and crossing a line he could never uncross. The elderly woman's expression shifted as she listened, her earlier anger melting into something more complex. She stepped forward, still clutching her wallet, but now her free hand pressed against her heart. The crowd's murmurs changed tone, sympathy replacing judgment as Marcus's story touched something universal in their hearts, the desperate lengths one might go to save a loved one. Keanu listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Marcus finished speaking, the actor reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The crowd watched, confused, as he made a call. His next words stunned everyone present. He asked for his personal assistant, then began arranging immediate medical care for Becca. The security guards exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't protocol for handling attempted theft. The elderly woman moved closer, tears now visible in her eyes. She introduced herself as Mrs. Liam, a retired nurse who had lost her own daughter to illness years ago. Her voice trembled as she spoke of recognizing the desperation in Marcus's eyes, the same look she'd had when searching for ways to save her child. Instead of pressing charges, she asked Keanu if she could help, offering her experience with the medical system to help navigate Becca's care. Marcus stared in disbelief as Keanu helped him to his feet. The actor's arm stayed steady around his shoulders, supporting him as the reality of what was happening slowly sank in. The crowd's phones captured every moment, but the scene had transformed from scandal to something profoundly moving. People began sharing their own stories of medical hardship, of families torn apart by illness and bills. A local business owner stepped forward, offering Marcus a job interview on the spot. Keanu's voice cut through the growing chorus of support, suggesting they move somewhere more private to sort everything out. But before they left, he turned to address the crowd. He spoke about second chances, about how society's first response to desperation shouldn't be punishment, but understanding. The phones recorded his impromptu speech, but it wasn't the usual celebrity soundbite. It was raw, genuine, born from the moment. Mrs. Liam insisted on accompanying them, her earlier fear completely replaced by maternal concern. As they walked toward Keanu's waiting car, she shared stories of her nursing days, of families she'd helped navigate the complex healthcare system. Marcus listened, hope beginning to replace the despair that had driven him to such desperate measures. The local police arrived just as they were leaving, responding to earlier calls about the attempted theft. Keanu spoke with them quietly, explaining the situation. The officers, recognizing both the actor and the complexity of the situation, agreed to let Keanu handle it, though they stressed the seriousness of Marcus's actions. One officer even offered to connect them with local resources for families dealing with medical crises. As they drove toward Marcus's apartment to check on Becca, the young man sat silently in the back seat, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Mrs. Liam held his hand. Her earlier fear of him transformed into grandmotherly concern. Keanu made more calls, setting things in motion that would change not just Marcus and Becca's lives, but inspire a movement larger than any of them could have imagined. The social media videos of the incident were already spreading, but they told a story different from what anyone had expected. Instead of another celebrity catching a criminal, they showed something far more powerful. The moment when punishment gave way to compassion, when desperation met understanding, and when a community began to realize that sometimes the biggest crimes hide the deepest pain. The elevator might have been broken, but nothing could slow down the group as they climbed the 15 flights to Marcus's apartment. Keanu took the stairs 2 at a time, his long legs carrying him effortlessly upward, while Mrs. Liam followed at a steadier pace, already making notes on her phone about medical contacts she planned to call. Marcus led the way, his earlier shame transformed into urgent hope. Becca's cough greeted them before Marcus could even unlock the door. The sound made Mrs. Liam's nursing instincts kick in immediately. The apartment told its own story, neat despite its shabbiness, with Becca's artwork covering the walls like wallpaper. Medical supplies and pill bottles crowded every surface, their labels recording a history of failed treatments and mounting costs. Becca sat up in her bed, her eyes widening as Keanu Reeves ducked through her doorway. For a moment, she thought the medication was making her hallucinate. Her sketchbook fell from her lap, pages fluttering open to reveal detailed drawings of fantastical worlds where illness didn't exist. Keanu picked up the sketchbook, studying the artwork with genuine appreciation, while Mrs. Liam immediately moved to check Becca's vital signs with the practiced ease of a veteran nurse. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Keanu's personal assistant arrived with a specialist doctor he knew, who examined Becca thoroughly, while Mrs. Liam provided the medical history she'd already pieced together from the prescription bottles and Marcus's scattered explanations. The diagnosis hadn't been wrong, but the treatment approach had missed crucial elements that the specialist quickly identified. While the medical professionals conferred, Keanu sat with Marcus in the tiny kitchen. The actor pulled out his laptop, making arrangements that would reshape the siblings' future. First came the immediate needs, paying off the existing medical bills that had driven Marcus to such desperation. Then came the arrangements for Becca's new treatment plan, with the specialist recommending a cutting-edge therapy program that had shown promising results in similar cases. Mrs. Liam proved invaluable, her years of nursing experience helping translate medical jargon into understandable terms for Marcus. She took charge of organizing Becca's medications and creating a care schedule that made sense. More importantly, she provided the kind of practical medical knowledge that only comes from decades of hands-on experience. Every so often, she would pause to squeeze Marcus's shoulder or straighten Becca's blanket with maternal tenderness. The apartment's atmosphere transformed as hope replaced desperation. Becca's cough still punctuated conversations, but it no longer carried the weight of impending tragedy. Keanu made more calls, arranging for the siblings to move to a ground-floor apartment in a better building, closer to the medical facilities Becca would need. The rent would be covered until Marcus could get back on his feet, something made easier by the job training program Keanu had enrolled him in. As evening approached, Becca's room had become an impromptu command center for Operation New Beginning, as Mrs. Liam had dubbed it. The specialist worked with Keanu's assistant to fast-track Becca's acceptance into the treatment program. Mrs. Liam coordinated with local pharmacies to sort out medication deliveries. Through it all, Becca watched with a growing spark in her eyes, her hand never leaving her brother's. Marcus sat in the corner, overwhelmed by the kindness surrounding him. The morning's desperate act felt like a lifetime ago. Keanu noticed his quiet struggle and pulled him aside for a conversation that would stay with Marcus forever. The actor spoke not as a celebrity dispensing wisdom, but as someone who understood pain and the lengths people go to protect those they love. He shared his own experiences with family illness, speaking of choices and consequences, redemption, and second chances. Before leaving, Keanu established a trust fund for Becca's ongoing medical care and Marcus's education. But more valuable than the financial support was the network of care they'd built in a single afternoon. Mrs. Liam insisted on becoming their honorary grandmother, promising to check in daily and help manage Becca's care. The specialist gave them his personal number for emergencies. Even the building's superintendent, who had appeared to fix the broken radiator after a call from Keanu's assistant, offered to keep an eye on the siblings. As the sun set outside the apartment windows, Marcus watched Becca smile genuinely for the first time in months as she showed her artwork to Keanu. Mrs. Liam had taken over the kitchen, preparing a proper meal while teaching Marcus how to make Becca's favorite soup. The specialist doctor was already scheduling follow-up appointments, his initial prognosis cautiously optimistic about the new treatment plan. Marcus realized that this single day hadn't just saved them from immediate crisis. It had given them something far more precious than money or medical care. It had given them a future, and more importantly, it had given them a family, the kind that forms not from blood, but from the unexpected kindness of strangers who choose to become more than strangers. 3 months passed, marking the seasons with quiet but profound changes. The new apartment buzzed with life and purpose, sunlight streaming through windows that Becca could now approach without exhaustion. Her treatment program showed promising results. Her cough had subsided, and color returned to her cheeks. The walls of their new home displayed her latest artwork, each piece brighter and more hopeful than the last. Marcus threw himself into his job training program with the same determination that had once driven him to desperation. Every morning, he attended classes at the Technical Institute where Keanu had enrolled him, learning computer programming with an intensity that impressed his instructors. Evenings found him working part-time at the local community center, helping other young people navigate difficult circumstances. His own story became a powerful testament to the possibility of change. Mrs. Liam became a fixture in their lives, arriving each morning with homemade soup and grandmotherly wisdom. She transformed their kitchen into a command center of recovery, teaching Marcus to cook nutritious meals while monitoring Becca's medication schedule with professional precision. Her presence filled the void left by their parents' absence, bringing warmth and structure to their once chaotic lives. Becca's medical journey progressed under the specialist's care. The new treatment protocol, though challenging, showed consistent improvement. She started attending online classes again, catching up on the education her illness had interrupted. Her sketchbook now captured scenes of hope rather than escape. Drawings of their new life, their growing chosen family, and the future she could finally see clearly. The incident that brought them all together transformed into something larger than themselves. The video of Keanu's intervention went viral, sparking discussions about healthcare access and community responsibility. Local news stations picked up the story, focusing not on the attempted theft but on the systemic issues that drove a young man to such desperation. Marcus found himself reluctantly in the spotlight, using the attention to advocate for other families facing similar struggles. Keanu's influence extended beyond the initial help. He connected Marcus with mentors in the tech industry, creating opportunities that once seemed impossible. But more importantly, he checked in regularly, becoming a steady presence in their lives. His visits were quiet affairs, marked by genuine interest in their progress and thoughtful conversations about their future. The community center where Marcus worked started a program specifically designed to help families navigate medical crises, inspired by their story. Mrs. Liam volunteered her expertise, teaching people how to advocate for their loved ones within the healthcare system. The elderly nurse found new purpose in retirement, her experience becoming a beacon of hope for others facing similar challenges. Marcus's transformation showed most clearly in his interactions with others. The shame that once haunted his eyes gave way to quiet confidence. He spoke at youth programs about choices and consequences, about the fine line between desperation and hope. His story resonated because it wasn't just about receiving help. It was about using that help to become someone who could help others. Becca's artwork began attracting attention from local galleries. Her pieces, influenced by her journey through illness and recovery, spoke to others facing their own battles. She started an online art therapy group for chronically ill teenagers, creating a space where they could express their struggles and hopes through creativity. The community that gathered around her became another thread in the tapestry of support that now defined their lives. The trust fund Keanu established ensured Becca's medical care continued uninterrupted, but its impact reached beyond mere financial security. It provided peace of mind that allowed both siblings to focus on growth rather than survival. Marcus no longer jumped at every phone ring, no longer lay awake calculating costs against needs. That mental freedom became the foundation for their broader transformation. As spring turned to summer, their apartment became a gathering place for an unlikely family. Sunday dinners hosted Mrs. Liam, occasionally joined by Keanu when his schedule allowed. The specialist doctor stopped by to check on Becca, but stayed for coffee and conversation. Even some of Marcus's classmates from the Technical Institute became regular visitors, drawn by the sense of community that now filled their home. He didn't notice the black SUV pulling up to the curb or the tall figure stepping out, adjusting dark sunglasses against the morning glare. Marcus was too focused on his target, on the open handbag, on thoughts of Becca waiting at home. He couldn't have known that the next few moments would completely transform his life's trajectory, or that the man in sunglasses was about to become an unexpected witness to his desperate act. Marcus timed his move perfectly, sliding between tourists as the street performer hit a crescendo on his guitar. His fingers brushed the leather of the elderly woman's handbag, finding the wallet within. Years of pickpocketing accusations from his high school bullies flashed through his mind. How ironic that he'd become exactly what they'd falsely claimed he was. The wallet slipped free, and for a moment, time seemed to slow down. Then everything went wrong. The elderly woman turned suddenly, bumping into Marcus. Her startled gasp drew attention. Marcus clutched the wallet and ran, his feet carrying him before his brain could process the decision. Shouts erupted behind him. The crowd parted like water, some people reaching for phones, others trying to block his path. Marcus darted through the growing chaos, his heart thundering in his chest. Becca's face flashed in his mind, giving his legs extra speed. He cut through an alley, vaulted over a stack of boxes, and emerged onto a less crowded street. Freedom seemed possible until he rounded the corner and slammed full force into someone stepping out of a coffee shop. The impact sent both of them sprawling onto the sidewalk. The wallet flew from Marcus's grip, skidding across the concrete. As he scrambled to his feet, he found himself staring into the face of Keanu Reeves, whose sunglasses had been knocked away in the collision. The actor's intense gaze locked onto Marcus, then shifted to the wallet lying between them. Time froze. The crowd that had been chasing Marcus caught up, forming a circle around them. Phones appeared everywhere, recording the scene. Marcus saw his chances of escape vanishing with each passing second. The elderly woman's voice cut through the murmurs as she pushed through the crowd, pointing at Marcus and calling for someone to stop him. Keanu stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. Marcus remained frozen, trapped between the approaching security guards and the man he'd seen in countless movies. His mind raced through options: run, fight, beg, confess. But before he could act, Keanu did something unexpected. He stepped between Marcus and the angry crowd. The security guards arrived, ready to grab Marcus. Someone in the crowd shouted about calling the police. The elderly woman demanded her wallet back, her voice shaking with anger and fear. Marcus felt the walls closing in, his chest tight with panic. Becca's medication, her pain, her needs, all of it would be meaningless once he was arrested. Keanu's voice cut through the chaos, deep and authoritative. He raised his hands, gesturing for everyone to calm down. The crowd fell silent, starstruck by his presence, yet confused by his actions. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes, the weight of his situation crushing down on him. He hadn't noticed he was shaking until Keanu turned to face him, those famous kind eyes studying his face with an intensity that seemed to peer straight into his soul. The elderly woman retrieved her wallet from the ground, checking its contents with trembling fingers. Everything was still there. Marcus hadn't even had time to open it. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scene, highlighting the tears now flowing freely down Marcus's cheeks. His legs gave out, and he sank to his knees, overwhelmed by shame and desperation. What happened next would stun everyone watching, transforming a moment of crime and punishment into something entirely unexpected. The crowd held their breath as Keanu Reeves knelt beside the trembling teenager. Security guards stood ready, but Keanu waved them back with a quiet authority that no one dared question. Marcus couldn't meet the actor's eyes, his shame burning hotter than the morning sun overhead. The phones kept recording, but Keanu seemed completely unconcerned with the growing social media moment unfolding around them. Keanu spoke softly, his voice carrying a gentleness that caught everyone off guard. He asked Marcus his name, then why? Why risk everything for a stranger's wallet? The simple question broke something inside Marcus. The words poured out between quiet sobs, telling the story of Becca, of their parents' accident, of medical bills that grew faster than his minimum wage jobs could handle. He spoke of his sister's pain, of watching her fade away while he failed to help her, of the choice between letting her suffer and crossing a line he could never uncross. The elderly woman's expression shifted as she listened, her earlier anger melting into something more complex. She stepped forward, still clutching her wallet, but now her free hand pressed against her heart. The crowd's murmurs changed tone, sympathy replacing judgment as Marcus's story touched something universal in their hearts, the desperate lengths one might go to save a loved one. Keanu listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Marcus finished speaking, the actor reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The crowd watched, confused, as he made a call. His next words stunned everyone present. He asked for his personal assistant, then began arranging immediate medical care for Becca. The security guards exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't protocol for handling attempted theft. The elderly woman moved closer, tears now visible in her eyes. She introduced herself as Mrs. Liam, a retired nurse who had lost her own daughter to illness years ago. Her voice trembled as she spoke of recognizing the desperation in Marcus's eyes, the same look she'd had when searching for ways to save her child. Instead of pressing charges, she asked Keanu if she could help, offering her experience with the medical system to help navigate Becca's care. Their story continued to inspire others, proving that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to unexpected light. Marcus's desperate choice that morning became not an endpoint but a beginning, the start of a transformation that rippled outward, touching lives far beyond their own. The change wasn't just in their circumstances, but in who they had become. Two siblings who had learned to accept help and now worked to extend that same kindness to others. 1 year after that fateful morning in the shopping district, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium at the community center. The room buzzed with energy as he shared his story at the first annual Second Chances Conference, an event born from his experience. The audience included medical professionals, social workers, and families facing their own battles with chronic illness and mounting bills. Becca sat in the front row, her recovery evident in her straight posture and bright eyes. Her artwork lined the walls of the auditorium, powerful pieces that captured both struggle and hope. Several local galleries had already featured her work, and a children's hospital had commissioned her to create murals for their long-term care ward. Her talent, once confined to a sickbed, now brought comfort to others facing similar battles. Mrs. Liam had become the driving force behind a new medical advocacy program that paired retired healthcare professionals with families navigating complex medical situations. Her network of volunteer nurses grew monthly, each bringing decades of experience to help bridge the gap between medical institutions and desperate families. The program, funded in part by Keanu's foundation, had already helped hundreds of families avoid the crisis point that had driven Marcus to such desperate measures. The Technical Institute, where Marcus studied, implemented a scholarship program specifically for caregivers who had put their education on hold to support ill family members. Marcus helped design the program, ensuring it included flexible schedules and remote learning options. 3 other students in situations similar to his had already enrolled, their determination matching his own. Local businesses, inspired by the story, created a job network specifically for family caregivers needing flexible employment. The initiative started small but grew steadily, with companies recognizing the unique skills and dedication these employees brought to the workplace. Marcus's own part-time position at the community center expanded into a full-time role managing their crisis intervention program. The specialist who treated Becca established a monthly clinic offering consultations to families struggling to find the right treatment path. Other medical professionals joined the effort, creating a network of care that extended beyond traditional hospital walls. They worked closely with Mrs. Liam's advocacy program, ensuring medical expertise reached those who needed it most. The elderly woman whose wallet Marcus had attempted to steal that morning, Mrs. Liam's friend Margaret, became another unexpected ally. She used her connections in the local business community to organize fundraising events supporting the medical advocacy program. Her openness about the incident and her choice to respond with compassion rather than prosecution became a powerful testament to the possibility of transformation. Keanu's influence remained steady but subtle. His foundation provided initial funding for many of these initiatives, but more importantly, his ongoing mentorship helped Marcus navigate the challenges of becoming a community leader. Their regular conversations evolved from crisis management to discussions about sustainable community development and long-term change. The viral video of that morning continued to circulate, but now it appeared alongside updates about the programs it inspired. News outlets that initially covered the incident as a heartwarming celebrity story returned to document the lasting changes in the community. Social workers cited the case when arguing for more comprehensive support systems for families facing medical crises. Becca's online art therapy group expanded into a full-fledged support network for chronically ill teenagers. Her own recovery journey, documented through her artwork, provided hope to others still struggling. The group's weekly virtual meetings became a safe space where young people could share their fears and celebrations with others who truly understood. Marcus's coding skills progressed rapidly, and he began developing an app to help families track medical expenses and connect with available resources. His instructors at the Technical Institute provided guidance, turning the project into a practical learning experience that would help others facing similar challenges. Several of his classmates volunteered their time to help, forming a dedicated development team. The community center's crisis intervention program, under Marcus's leadership, helped prevent dozens of desperate situations from escalating into legal troubles. They worked closely with local law enforcement to create alternative response protocols for cases involving medical hardship. The program became a model for other communities looking to balance justice with compassion. Mrs. Liam's Soup Kitchen started as a small effort to ensure proper nutrition for families focused on medical care, grew into a community gathering space. Local restaurants donated supplies, and cooking classes taught caregivers how to prepare healthy meals on limited time and budgets. The kitchen became another thread in the growing network of support, providing not just food but connection and community. The transformation that began with a moment of desperation continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways none of them could have predicted. Marcus and Becca's story demonstrated that sometimes the darkest moments could lead to the brightest changes, not just for individuals but for entire communities. Their experience became a testament to the power of choosing understanding over judgment and the profound impact of giving someone a second chance. On the second anniversary of that life-changing morning, Keanu Reeves returned to the same shopping district, this time for the opening of the Second Chances Community Center. The building, once a vacant storefront, now housed the combined efforts of all the programs born from Marcus and Becca's story. Marcus stood beside him at the podium, no longer the desperate teenager, but a confident young professional in a neat suit, his coding certification proudly framed in his new office inside. Becca, now fully recovered and starting college classes, had painted a mural across the center's entrance. The artwork depicted a sunrise breaking through storm clouds, with hands of different sizes and colors reaching out to help each other. Her health continued to improve, and her art therapy program had become an official part of 3 local hospitals' treatment protocols. Mrs. Liam, despite her attempts to give others credit, received special recognition for her tireless work coordinating the medical advocacy network. The program had expanded to neighboring cities, with retired healthcare workers volunteering their expertise to guide families through medical crises. Her tiny apartment had become an unofficial headquarters, always smelling of soup and hope. The center itself represented everything they'd learned about community support and second chances. The ground floor housed the medical advocacy offices, where Mrs. Liam's team of volunteer nurses helped families navigate healthcare challenges. The second floor contained the technical training classrooms, where Marcus taught coding basics to caregivers seeking flexible career options. The top floor hosted Becca's art therapy sessions and support group meetings. During the opening ceremony, Marcus shared an unexpected update. His app for tracking medical resources had caught the attention of a major healthcare corporation. They wanted to implement it nationwide, ensuring other families would have easier access to support systems. The proceeds would fund scholarships for young caregivers, creating a sustainable cycle of education and opportunity. Keanu spoke briefly, deflecting attention from his role and focusing instead on the community's collective achievement. He mentioned how a moment that could have ended in punishment instead sparked a movement of compassion and understanding. His foundation support had helped, but the real change came from countless individuals choosing to be part of the solution. Margaret, the woman whose wallet started it all, cut the ribbon at the ceremony. She and Mrs. Liam had become inseparable friends, their shared commitment to helping others forging a bond stronger than the incident that brought them together. Their weekly coffee meetings had turned into planning sessions for expanding the center's programs. After the ceremonies ended and the crowds dispersed, Marcus found a quiet moment with Keanu in his new office. The actor picked up a framed photo on the desk, an image of that first day, when desperation met compassion on a busy street. Marcus had kept it as a reminder of how far they'd come and how far they could still go. The community center buzzed with activity below them. Mrs. Liam organizing her volunteers, Becca setting up for an art therapy session, local business owners discussing job placements for program participants. The sound of hope and purpose rose through the building, a symphony of second chances and renewed possibilities. Marcus looked out his window at the shopping district where his story of transformation began. Somewhere out there, another person faced their own moment of desperation. But now, thanks to the ripple effects of compassion, they would find help before reaching that breaking point. That, perhaps, was the greatest transformation of all. 2 years after that transformative morning, Keanu stepped out of the Second Chances Community Center into the evening sunset. He paused beside Becca's mural, watching families enter and exit the building with renewed hope in their eyes. A young mother clutched medical paperwork, relief visible on her face after meeting with Mrs. Liam. A teenager carried his laptop from Marcus's coding class, his path already different from the one Marcus nearly took. Inside, Marcus stood at his office window, Becca by his side. Their reflection in the glass showed 2 people transformed, not just by the help they received, but by their choice to turn that help into hope for others. The desperate young man and his sick sister had become architects of change, proving that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures. Mrs. Liam's voice echoed from the first floor as she welcomed another family, her warmth carrying through the building. Margaret arranged tomorrow's schedule of volunteer nurses, each one ready to guide another family through their medical journey. The center hummed with activity, each footstep and conversation writing new chapters in an ongoing story of transformation. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with a single moment of compassion, when someone chooses to look past actions to see the pain hiding beneath. In that busy shopping district 2 years ago, a moment of desperation became a catalyst for change, reminding us all that every ending has the potential for a new beginning. Tell us in the comments about a moment of kindness that changed your life.